This is one of the most famous pictures taken during the battle for Normandy, certainly from a Canadian perspective. And the location that it happened in has hardly changed at all, allowing us to travel back in time. This picture has been described as the closest we will get to seeing someone win the Victoria Cross, and we will cover that action in detail to tell the story of Major David Currie. But we'll also tell the story of this German officer and the circumstances surrounding his part in this picture. Clearly he's holding his hands up, offering his surrender along with his men, and he's seen here at the point of a bayonet that belonged to a Canadian soldier. But he was never processed at a prisoner holding area. I'll explain the strategic situation at the Falaise Pocket before dialing down into the tactical situation to convey the exploits of this outstanding leader who would personally lead his men into harm's way, a boulder in a torrent of water as the Germans poured past their position. Behind me is St. Lambert-sur-Dives, and in this video I want to highlight the exploits of a very famous Canadian, Major Currie, who is, as I understand it, the only Canadian who was awarded the Victoria Cross from the Canadian Armoured Regiments. Now this story is for all of the Canadian supporters of this channel. I want to highlight the exceptional exploits of this leader. Where I'm stood now is the high ground north of St. Lambert-sur-Dives. And you can see that they have quite a commanding position from here, and this was occupied by the Canadians. Now if I just look over to this direction, you can see the high ground over there, which is Mont Ormel. That was occupied by the Polish, and the hills in the far distance were occupied by the Americans. So you could see there was an envelopment that was happening, and over in this direction, which is over to the west, this was where the British and other elements of the Canadian forces were. Now the Germans were in the low ground. The Germans were in this pocket. This is the Falaise Pocket. And you would have seen plumes of dust emanating from the armoured vehicles, their tracks, but also from the trucks and the mechanised forces that they had. They would have been coming through this dry terrain in August, loads of dust, so the Allies knew exactly where they were. And so this bowl, if you like, was rich pickings for joint fires. And by that we mean artillery, we mean air-delivered munitions, etc. And so within this plain, running from right as you look at it all the way to the left, that is where the Germans were going, because they were trying to get out of this trap which they found themselves in. They were inside a pocket and they ran the risk of being completely enveloped. So they were heading in this direction, they were heading to the east to get away. This small town of Saint-Lambert was in the way. It was on the north shoulder, and Major Currie and his men were here trying to close that gap, trying to prevent the Germans from escaping. But he didn't have many men to do this, and the fighting here was ferocious. Now Major Currie was in command of a very small grouping of Canadian troops, which included the South Alberta Regiment from the 29th Armoured Reconnaissance Regiment. He also had 2 companies of the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders, and 1 company of the Lincoln and Welland Regiment. And he had a battery of anti-tank guns, I believe it was. By the end of the battle, the only officer that remained from this Canadian contingent was Major Currie. So let's look at the mapping of Lower Normandy to understand the strategic situation. Now this is the River Dives, and it straddles the opening of the Falaise Pocket, the Falaise Gap. All the red is the ground held by the Allies, so you've got the Brits and the Canadians to the north, the US troops to the south. And there are 3 crossing locations at Trun, Saint-Lambert and at Moissy. The Germans are pouring east to escape this complete encirclement. Now the tactical situation shows the River Dives running through the village of Saint-Lambert. Now the river itself is not particularly wide and it's not very deep, and especially in the summer it's very shallow. However, the banks are very steep and they will stop all forms of vehicles. St. Lambert also has a set of crossroads critical to controlling the movement in the area. The Canadians held the high ground to the west, but they had to secure the village to prevent the German withdrawal. The Germans wanted to seize the village to secure these crossroads to enable their withdrawal east.
So Major Currie was given this task. Under his command was C Squadron of the 29th Armoured Reconnaissance Regiment and B Company of the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders. He had about 12 tanks in total, but that included Cromwell tanks as well, but he did mostly have M4 Shermans. B Company consisted of about 55 soldiers, so by the time he received reinforcements later on, his troops totaled around about 175.
So we've had a good overview of the town and a little bit of the terrain. I've applied some mapping as well. Hopefully that's explained the situation. Let's head down into the town.
Currie gave the order to advance into the village with the intention of pushing through all the way to Chambois, sealing the German escape route. Now, this objective was optimistic to say the least. Almost immediately, 2 Sherman tanks were knocked out by German 88mm guns as they pushed down the Trun Road. Fighting was fierce to secure the village, infantry clearing buildings to reach the crossroads in the centre. But with only 55 dismounted troops, not all of these buildings could be held. This is the crossroads as it looks today, looking west back towards their start line. And in this very spot was a Panther tank blocking their route. The buildings today still bear the scars of the fighting that occurred here. I want to share with you the story of a Panther on the crossroads at the centre of the village. Now, this was early on in the battle. Now, to reach this tank, the party had to clear through the intervening houses. When they got close enough, Lieutenant Armour climbed on top of the tank with a grenade in his hand. And just as he was about to drop the grenade inside the turret, a German officer looked out. The tank closed its turret and started up its engine and began to back up about 25 feet. The small turret to the left of the gun opened, and as a head emerged, Corporal Hanavan, who was observing from the corner of a building, took aim with his Sten gun and shot the unfortunate German in the forehead. Lieutenant Armour immediately seized on this opportunity. He ran up and he dropped the grenade inside the open turret. And this is that Panther tank at that crossroads. What an amazing story. And the reason I love this place is the fact, as I said, it hasn't changed at all. But once the crossroads had been secure, Currie ordered reinforcements to push to the south of the village and secure the bridge area. He personally sighted these defenders. However, this coincided with the Germans intensifying their efforts to counterattack from the south, from the east, from the direction of Chambois, and also from the north as they tried to open this pocket to allow their Germans to withdraw. During the next 36 hours, the Germans held one counterattack after another against the Canadian force, but so skillfully had Major Currie organised his defensive positions that these attacks were repulsed with severe casualties to the enemy. Throughout 3 days and nights of fierce fighting, Major Currie's gallant conduct and contempt for danger set a magnificent example to all ranks of the force under his command. The only time reinforcements were able to get through to his force, he himself led the 40 men forward to their positions and explained the importance of their task as a part of the defence. When during the attack, these new reinforcements withdrew under the intense fire brought down by the enemy, he personally collected them and led them forward into positions again, where inspired by his leadership they held for the remainder of the battle. His employment of artillery support was typical of his cool calculation of the risks involved in every situation. At one time, despite the fact that rounds were falling short, almost within 15 yards of his own tank, he ordered fire from medium artillery to continue because of its devastating effect upon the enemy units that were attacking him. Since all of the officers under his command were either killed or wounded during the action, Major Currie had virtually no respite from his duties, and he only had 1 hour's sleep during this entire period. When his force was finally relieved, he fell asleep on his feet and he collapsed. And that is an extract from his citation. All told, they had destroyed 7 enemy tanks, 12 88mm guns, and 40 vehicles. It's estimated that 300 Germans were killed, 500 wounded, and over 2,100 captured. Simply outstanding. So now let's look at some then and now comparisons. And this picture shows a German officer's motorcycle and sidecar, and more on that story to come later. But this is a brilliant picture. This Sherman is positioned in an alley to cover the narrow road that you can see on the right-hand side, and it can also traverse to cover the road leading out of town. But most importantly, it shows infantry and armor working in cooperation in an urban setting.
A bit lower. Maybe like that. I think we got it.
Now this is the most famous picture. This is David Currie accepting the surrender of a group of Germans who had stumbled into his defences. They turned left instead of right, and they headed right towards where his blocking line was.
Again, I've got to stand in the road to get this one, but this is the best one. This is the one I really came here for, so let's try and get this correct. There's only one chimney. The chimney goes about there. Okay, just focus. I think that is about it. Let me know what you think. Now, there is a bit of controversy associated with this story. That German officer, who was pictured surrendering clearly with his hands up, was later identified by his mother, who saw the picture and then wrote to the Canadians, basically saying, "There's evidence that my son was taken prisoner by your soldiers." So what happened to him? Surely there's records of him ending up in a prisoner of war camp, being processed. And that's where the story gets a little bit murky.
Now, camera footage shows the German officer approaching in a sidecar. He's covered by a Bren gunner firing through a window screen. Now, the German officer can be seen here covering his face with his map case. I'm not entirely sure why he did this. But next, the officer is seen with his hands up, held at the point of a bayonet by Company Sergeant Major Mitchell of B Company of the Argylls. Now, Company Sergeant Major Mitchell was a giant of a man. Contemporary accounts and unit histories highlight Mitchell's bravery that day, most notably in rescuing a Canadian tanker who'd been trapped inside his burning tank. Now the camera stops, and then the German officer is then seen with his hat at a slight jaunty angle and with a busted lip. So perhaps he had been struck by the Company Sergeant Major. Now, allegedly, the German officer had refused to surrender to a mere soldier and insisted on surrendering to an officer. Now, there's no evidence that this happened, only soldier accounts and the unofficial testimony of Company Sergeant Major Mitchell. Contemporary accounts and unit histories highlight Mitchell's bravery that day, as I've already said, most notably when he rescued the trapped Canadian tanker. On the 19th of August, Company Sergeant Major Mitchell, along with Private Holmes, bravely ran towards a burning Sherman tank under intense enemy fire. They traversed the turret which was blocking the driver's hatch, and they successfully rescued the driver after about 5 minutes. Now, bearing in mind this Sherman was on fire.
And so the unofficial story is that the Company Sergeant Major took the young German officer down this road, around the side of this building, and shot him right here.
That being so, I will still share the rumoured story, if only for balance, and also because Company Sergeant Major Mitchell is alleged to have told this story himself after the war. Regardless of what happened, we do know that no officer by the name of Hauptmann Siegfried Rausch was processed in a prisoner of war camp in that area. So what do you think?
So in order to get this next one, I have to stand in the road, so I'm going to try and make this as quick as I can. And you can just about see that the building on the right hand side is the same. I was trying to line up the aspect, and slightly to the left, and then the building that's damaged is just off there to the right, and in front of that is a new building. But given there's a car coming behind me, That's probably going to be as good as I'm going to get, I think.
Major Currie, when did you first learn that you had been awarded the Victoria Cross?
Last Wednesday, about 5 o'clock, the colonel called me up and told me to report to his headquarters right away.
Which you did.
Yes, I reported to
The heavy
his
fighting in
headquarters.
Saint
He
Lambert
took me into
ended
his room and
today.
told me
As
that
one
I was
English
now
correspondent
Major
put it,
Currie,
the
VC.
town became the symbol of
And
the
did
utter
you do
defeat
anything
and
special about it
annihilation
right
of the
away?
German army. The
Well, I
roads
was,
leading from the
staggered
town
and,
were jammed with
sat
wrecked
down, had a
German
cigarette, and
vehicles.
thought it
The
over.
ditches beside were lined with their
By the
dead,
way,
and the
when
dirty,
you took the
oily
squadron up
river
to St.
was
Lambert-sur-Dives,
swollen with wreckage in the
did you
bodies of
realize what an
horses and
extremely
men.
tough and important job it was that had been given you?
I remember thinking that at the time that it was the toughest job the regiment had ever been given.
And later events showed you were right.
Yes, it was a touch-and-go battle at times. At one time, I called the boys up on the air and told them what to expect. And I told them that they were to sit pat because we weren't going anywhere.
When you call up tanks like that, do you get an answer back?
Yes, I got the usual answer. Okay, boss.
You'd like to say a bit more, wouldn't you, about the way the boys fought during the show?
Yes, I would. The boys fought very well throughout the whole show. And I remember one counterattack in particular where the boys, the cherries, I should say, came in so fast and thick that they climbed all over the tanks. And the boys were fending them off with pistols, grenades, and in one instance, swinging the turret of the tank around to knock them off the tank.
And they drove them back, I suppose.
Yes, they held them off that time.
Still another Canadian has been awarded that most coveted of all decorations, the Victoria Cross. Major David Currie of Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan is the recipient of the honor. General Crerar congratulates him on receipt of the good news. Major Currie is a squadron commander of an armored regiment. He is decorated for the outstanding part he played in the Lambert-sur-Dives offensive. This opened the last phase in the drive to close the Falais gap. Standing his ground despite fierce counterattacks, he advanced to invest his objective. By this time, every officer of his small force had been killed or wounded. His conduct will forever be an example to the entire Canadian Army. Still clad in battle-stained dungarees, Major Currie is rushed directly from the action area to Buckingham Palace to receive his decoration.
If you enjoyed this video, why not check out my other videos in appreciation of the Canadian Armed Forces. Worthington Force is a good one, as is the Juno Beach video. I really enjoyed making those. Please give this video a like and leave a comment, as it helps to show YouTube that this video is worth sharing to other viewers. You can support the channel by purchasing mugs and t-shirts from the link in the video description. And the t-shirts are far more popular than I expected them to be, and we've now got a new stock on the shelves, so go ahead and get yourself one. That's all from me, until next time.